I came into the job back in August, but really it started in the springtime during my interview with Secretary Mattis. And he had said that he was going to be working on this national defense strategy that they intend to publish, and I think he published it, a couple weeks ago, about how do we modernize the force to maintain our overmatched position against near-peer competitors. The rise of 4 countries in particular, North Korea, Iran, China, and Russia, the investments and the competition, both militarily, economically, has definitely garnered a lot of attention. And it's clear that the choices that they've made has started to get closer, closing the gap towards our overmatched position. And that's the kind of why now. The Army has to continue to modernize itself to maintain its position as #1 in the world. So that there's no time like the present. Even though when you look at the challenges the Army face, over 185,000 troops deployed worldwide. We've been challenges with our fiscal position as a country, which has affected defense budgets over the last several years. But we know, even in the midst of all of the challenges we face, we know we have to evolve. We have an industrial age system that was created in 1973, the major commands that we have today, TRADOC, AMC, and FORCECOM. And the responsibilities of how we do material development design, weapon systems development, is spread across these commands. And that the relationships are not as close and as formed and as fused, the fusing of information of how we develop a requirement, work through the trade-offs, and go through the process. So there was really on my first day on the job when I was talking with General Milley and General McConville at the time, was how do we get better and how do we get faster? We had to look at where the responsibilities lie in the institution. But first and foremost, we had to be very specific about what we wanted. What are the priorities that we need to put our management attention, put our funding against, and drive, pull them through the knothole and get increased capability? And they were very simple. An Army shoots, it moves, and it communicates. So we sat through and looked at the portfolio, looked at the capabilities, and we recognized that long-range precision fires, next-generation combat vehicles, future vertical lift, networks, integrated air and missile defense, and soldier lethality that spans across all fundamentals: shoot, move, communicate, sustain, and protect. We locked in on these capabilities, and then said, how are we investing against these capabilities? Conducted several S&T reviews, moved the funding against these 6 priorities, in the upwards of 80% of our S&T budget, locking it in against those 6 capabilities. Then we looked at how are we looking at the process, and we conduct material development. And we saw across the enterprise there were responsibilities that laid in against these major commands, and said that rather than just creating a new organization, how do you restructure and put it all under one roof? So the talent is where it is in the country, but where it reports to and how it works together was what we really focused on. Formalizing the relationship between the requirements community and the acquisition community. And how do you do that? It's entirely about people. And I give them all the credit to my wingman, General Jim McConville, the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army. He went and handpicked the officers that we put in against these cross-functional teams. We have post-brigade command qualified officers that lead these cross-functional teams that fuses requirements, acquisition, technical, testing. One of them sitting here in the front row, Major General Pete Gallagher. And it was amazing when we went through this process. General McConville talked about their education, their staff experiences, their command experiences. Because if you look in history, whenever we've been successful in the Department of Defense, it really was about people. Who you put in charge, who was accountable, and how you generationally changed the outcome. Admiral Hyman Ricko or Lieutenant General Leslie Groves. They were very successful because they laid in the right people. And over time, they worked their career paths to sustain those great outcomes. So we have these cross-functional teams that we stood up immediately. I signed out 8 acquisition directives last fall that were authorities that were granted to us, the FY16 National Defense Authorization Act, to really put this in play, put the system in motion. Dr. Esper was confirmed in November, and his biggest theme that he's brought into the modernization process is communication. That the 4 of us in the Marshall Corridor have to be constantly interacting and engaging senior leadership in industry. And not just the traditional defense industry, across the country. So much so that even do we look at foreign partners as the potential doing work with them as well. So he wanted to open up the aperture as wide as could be to get the best ideas that industry could bring to bear. And he even said in his first day, he said, okay, the four of us are going to sit down, let's blood oath, we're not changing our priorities. We have to communicate and put our money where our mouth is. And so we've hit stride very quickly since he came on in November. And we are now approaching the 120-day mark that I laid in last fall for our condition-setting task force that's looking at the restructuring and keying up the courses of action that we need to look at and ultimately make the decision on how we move some of these roles and responsibilities into this organization that we're going to call the Army Futures Command. Ideally looking at a end of March timeframe to make a national announcement and have an interim operating capability by the summer of this calendar year 2018.